Good news, Alex Vesia won't be going to an arbitration hearing with the Dodgers, just as we suspected. He was under contract. Now we know how much he'll be making. Plus, a lot of Dodgers prospects are on a lot of top prospect lists. It's a good time to be a Dodger fan. Let's talk about it live on Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and thanks to those of you who are with us live here on Wednesday evening. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers, and you can make it easier on yourself to find it by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And speaking of getting started, Vince, here we are, another episode of Locked On Dodgers. You and me, both world champions. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the world champions at FanFest this weekend. I'm actually driving out tomorrow. That's why we're going a little bit earlier than usual this evening, so I can get a good night's sleep, so I can make the long trek down to LA. Looking forward to that, though. And one player who was probably going to be at FanFest anyway, but now we know how much he'll be getting paid to play this year is Alex Vesia. Vesia was eligible for arbitration, and he was the only arbitration-eligible player that the Dodgers didn't agree with before the I have to sneeze. Finish this sentence, Vince.
Before
Did you not before the deadline or before the date to exchange figures? But they did agree to a number with Alex Vesia. They agreed at $2.25 million for 2025, with a team option at, I think it was just over $3.5 million for 2026 with a $50,000 buyout. So he's guaranteed at least $2.3 million, which was almost, he had asked for $2.35 million. The Dodgers offered $2.05 million. So definitely closer to his side of things. And most likely means they won't even have to do this again next year. The Dodgers will just pick up his option next year, his final year of arbitration eligibility. Interesting thing is, even if they were to decline his option, he would still be under contract because they would just go to arbitration again. So if he had a really bad year this year, the Dodgers could decline his option, pay the $50,000 buyout, and then go to arbitration. But chances are they're just going to pick up that option.
Yeah, I mean, nothing that we didn't expect. And it is kind of interesting how, like, cheap relievers are when it comes to arbitration. You know, once you get a really good starter or a really good position player, like once you get into the arbitration years, you're paying still a pretty decent amount, not as maybe as much as they get on the open market, but a pretty solid amount. But for, Vesia, who is one of the better relievers on the Dodgers and better middle relievers in the league, to file at what he filed at and then to still get what he got, $2.3 million is kind of interesting how, relievers, if you're not a closer, you're not necessarily getting too much money on the arbitration market.
Yeah, for sure. It's arbitration is a weird situation. Saw in the chat, Yong Yi says Vesia will get paid more than Shohei Ohtani next season. Yeah, most of the Dodgers will. Did you delete that comment? I was about to. Oh, good. We will crack down on you in the chat, people. Yeah, I am very happy. The Dodgers have a pretty long-standing tradition of not going to arbitration with their players. They actually went to arbitration with two players in 1 year, Jock Peterson, and I forget who the other one was now, a couple of years ago. But other than that, I think the last one before those two was Joe Beimel, and Joe Beimel is, I think, older than me. So that's how long it's been. The Dodgers just don't believe in damaging their relationships with their players like that. And we said all along that they were for sure going to come to an agreement with Vesia because he is a very important part of this bullpen. And it is kind of funny that even though he's going to be making more than Shohei Ohtani, he's not making nearly what he would on the open market. It is just the nature of baseball's salary structure, like you said. I hope that Vesia can have a couple good years so he can at least get to one big payday, because, well, all of us would love to be making $2.25 million a year when you are talking about a career that, the average career lasts 2.5 years, and even the longest ones are 15 years. It's not, there's a long, you have to live for a long time on your baseball money after you're done. And so the more they can make, the better. And Vesia is, by all accounts, a great dude who, I want him to be happy and successful with the Dodgers. And I'm happy that it's starting with good feelings all around with him getting about what he wanted in arbitration.
Yeah. And, talking about Vesia, we kind of mentioned it, I think yesterday or whatever, the other day, like he does have an option left. It would be with the way the Dodgers bullpen is right now expected to be. There's not a lot of flexibility in terms of guys coming up and down. I did wonder if the Dodgers would throw him a little bit more money in order to, say, hey, we might option you down this year. In that regard, it wouldn't matter. I don't think he's still getting paid whatever he agrees to. So I don't know if that's something on the table, but it's definitely something I thought about and something we could see at one point. But hopefully everyone just stays healthy and nobody gets burnt out, and you don't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah, it'll be definitely going to be interesting to see how they manage this bullpen with Vesia being one of 7 high leverage relievers they have, and then Gratterall comes back, and we'll see if Dustin May or Bobby Miller or any of those guys end up in the bullpen, or even Ben Kasparius and Justin Robleski, some of those guys with really good stuff who have been starters mostly. So I can honestly say I couldn't even guess what the Dodgers bullpen strategy overall will be this season, just with how many guys they have. Obviously, the main strategy is get as many good arms as you can, because you can never have too many good relievers. And for that matter, you can never have too many good starters. That's the one thing they learned last year. But all in all, it's pretty cool for Alex Vesia after where he's come from. The fact that we talked about yesterday, he did come over as in a trade for Dylan Floro as a guy who no Dodger fan had ever heard of. He had debuted during the COVID season with the Marlins, but didn't pitch very much, and came over in a trade, and suddenly now, and he's had his ups and downs. You've had probably more blood pressure issues with Alex Vesia on the mound than a lot of guys. I know you particularly get a little bit nervous sometimes with him, but he has turned into a very, very good reliever and really important part of this really good bullpen.
Yeah, I still remember when he first came up, and I think he pitched in against the Marlins, I want to say, and Brewers maybe. They went in extras, and he walked a few guys and ended up, I think, giving up the game. Then he went back down. Then when he came back up, he's been pretty good ever since. Obviously, 2023 had a little bit of issues. He mentioned pitch clock maybe being that and kind of figuring that out. And, last year he was a little bit of Brandon League-esque, where he would get some guys on, although he wouldn't necessarily get ground balls to the end of a place. He would just, continue to strike guys out. But, by the end of the season, he was one of those trusted arms. And, it was somebody that really, really, really got the Dodgers where they needed to go.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's great news for the Dodgers, for Vesia. Again, it doesn't really affect their active roster because he was going to be on the team. The only question was how much he was going to get paid. So that doesn't change anything really. But there are a few guys knocking on the door who the Dodgers might end up having to make room for. A couple more top prospect lists have come out, and the Dodgers are really shining on all those lists. We're going to dig into a couple of those when we come back. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. And let's look at some of those options they have. If you just want to bet straight on who's going to win the Super Bowl, right now the Chiefs are minus 124 favorites. That's pretty darn close. That's a pretty tight game. You got Super Bowl props. Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes is at plus 110. Saquon Barkley's at plus 280. Everybody else is longer odds than that. I remember last time the Chiefs and Eagles played in the Super Bowl, there was you could bet on the possibility of both Travis and Jason Kelce scoring in the game. Travis Kelce obviously did. Jason Kelce obviously didn't. So hopefully you didn't put money on that. But, scoring a touchdown. Saquon Barkley minus 195. Obviously, he's probably going to score. But somebody a little bit, you can actually make some money on. Xavier Worthy from the Chiefs, plus 150. A lot of different options if you want to get in there. All you got to do is download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Hey, we are back. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being here with us live on Wednesday evening. Thanks to our everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. And you can make that easier on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Text direct with us, get our thoughts before the podcast, have one-on-one conversations, and join our insiders Discord server to talk with other Locked On Dodgers fans. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles over on YouTube. So, Vince, we talked a couple weeks ago about the Baseball Prospectus Top 101 and their top Dodgers prospects list. And they had Zaire Hope and Josue De Paula both way up there on the list. A couple more lists have come out recently. The Athletic, their top prospect list came out, and ESPN's just came out today. The Athletics is by Keith Law. I assume we will have Keith Law on to talk about his list at some point this offseason, sometime during spring training. I think we've done that 5 or 6 years in a row, so probably keep that tradition going. ESPN's list was interesting. Keith Law's list didn't have Roki Sasaki at number 1 because Keith, by his standard, Sasaki's not a prospect because he's already played professional baseball in Japan. Others do. ESPN does. The other one, I forget, another list came out last week.
MLB Pipeline.
MLB Pipeline, that's right, MLB's list. And so Roki Sasaki is the number 1 prospect in baseball on both of those lists. There's been a lot of other guys, though, that bounce all over the place. Like Zaire Hope, for example, he was top 10 on the Baseball Prospectus list. And here with on ESPN, he's, number 70. And that's kind of more in the range that he's fitting on most of the lists. Anything jump out to you about these lists, Vince? Any surprising names or surprising placements?
I think Emil Morales was only on one list, I believe. I want to say maybe the ESPN one. That was interesting just for the simple fact of he's one of the guys we haven't seen. Yeah, like I said, Zaire Hope's kind of been, I think I've seen him as low as 80-something, or I know he was 75 for MLB Pipeline and top 10 for Baseball Prospectus. But it just goes to everything that we've said so far about what the Dodgers' future looks like. And it's, Dalton Rushing's up there, and, he's a guy that's close to, if not major league ready already. Roki Sasaki, we know, is going to, be in the major leagues. Alex Freeland's been in a few, if not all, these lists. He's, probably the next one that's MLB ready. But then after that, it is a lot of young guys. It is guys that are, Josue De Paula is 19, Zaire Hope's 20, Jackson Ferris is 21. There is a lot. And I'm sure once we start seeing Dodger-specific lists, we will see Johnny Vargas and Emil Morales and, maybe some of these guys they just signed and, Kellen Lindsey, who they drafted last year. We'll see some of those names. And it goes to what the Dodgers' plan is right now. Right now, the roster is built a little bit differently than it had been in years past, and they do have a lot of money invested into the roster. But the main core of it is Ohtani, Mookie, and then the pitching, you got Yamamoto and, Glasnow, and now Roki and, Ohtani. And that's the core, and you're hoping to supplement that with some of these young guys, or again, some of these young guys become traded for other good players. So the Dodgers, for everything that they've spent to consistently have 5+ guys in every top 100 prospect ranking, as much as maybe people believe that these rankings are inflated for the Dodgers for whatever reason, it just goes to show that the machine's working very well.
Yeah, and the Dodgers, I saw a stat last year on opening day. There were more players on Major League opening day rosters who had originally been drafted by the Dodgers than any other team. Dodgers do good at drafting and developing. One of the ones that really stood out to me that I found interesting is Alex Freeland, he was drafted out of college in 2022 and was drafted in the 3rd round. And some people even said that was too high, but the Dodgers saw something in him. And then he got hurt his first year in the minors, but he has taken huge strides to the point where let me just read Kylie McDaniel's blurb about Freeland on the ESPN list. It says Freeland was a mid-tier prep prospect who got some pro attention before ending up at UCF and eventually going in the 3rd round of the 2022 draft. Entering the draft, he was an infielder, but not a very good shortstop. He had some power and patience, but nothing was plus, and he projected more as a utility guy than an impact player. That was the expectation entering 2024 before he went off, hitting 18 homers, stealing 31 bases, and drawing 91 walks while rising from high A to triple A. Freeland looks looser and more athletic with more separation at the plate than he did before his huge leap. He has improved at every swing-based metric I can find, and as a runner showing fringed average speed, he also got better in the field and now looks like a decent big league shortstop. He had a number of surgeries as a child to correct a club foot, so working around some remaining foot ankle limitations to become a later blooming athlete could make some sense in trying to understand how this breakout season occurred. Freeland still probably fits best at second base long-term and has 20 homer upside, but he may post plus on-base percentages as a switch hitter. Alex Freeland is a guy who, for me, I've kind of I don't know how seriously I've taken him as a prospect, but this last couple of weeks, seeing him consistently ranked pretty high on all of these lists by people who watch him play. I've never seen him play. I just, so I wonder if maybe I was stuck in kind of the scouting reports from the time he was drafted and hadn't really fully appreciated the strides that he took in 2024.
Yeah, he's one of those where we just kept talking about the Dodgers don't have anyone really coming up that was shortstop. And they traded for Trey Sweeney last offseason, and he kind of became that guy that we talked about if the Dodgers needed a shortstop in a pinch or some came up. I even had him as a bold prediction of somebody that was going to help the Dodgers, in the season or postseason. And he did help a team in the postseason, but it wasn't the Dodgers. And yeah, Freeland, that we seem to see some of these guys almost every year for the Dodgers that come up either out of nowhere or just, slowly do their thing and end up, becoming a top prospect. And, there's guys like, we talk about Kasperius a lot, who wasn't necessarily a top prospect, wasn't on any of these lists, but ultimately, did come in and deliver for the Dodgers. And, there's guys like Gavin Stone and different names like that who were top prospects, came in, went through a rough patch and then ended up figuring it out. And that, we saw that bear out in 2024. And then there's guys like Freeland who we don't know. Like, if you haven't seen them, you're not sure. Even if you have seen them, we're not technically scouts. You might not know too much or know what to look for. And he seems like a guy, at the very least, the way he's trending, to be someone that could play shortstop. Now, play shortstop for a World Series caliber team, that remains to be seen, but to at least play shortstop and make the big leagues, he seems like a lot of the Dodger prospects. There's a reason that the Dodgers had a lot of guys drafted that were on opening day rosters. It's because they identified talent probably better than anyone else, helped develop it. And even if those guys get traded, they still have some development depending how long they were in the system. And, that kind of shows out in this. I mean, Kyle Farmer's been in the big leagues for a long time. And I think he's in the NL West again with the Rockies. And, that's someone that maybe nobody would have expected back then when he came up for the Dodgers.
Yeah. The last one I want to talk about before we wrap up today's conversation about prospects. On Kylie McDaniel's list on ESPN for each player, he has a little thing of who the player reminds me of. For example, Dalton Rushing says he reminds me of Carlos Santana with less contact, but a viable defender at catcher. Josue De Paula, did you see who his reminds me of is, Vince?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yordan Alvarez. Yordan Alvarez, I don't know if you guys have heard, he's a pretty darn good hitter. And it's kind of interesting because De Paula hasn't hit many homers in the minor leagues, but all of these prospect lists say the same thing. Basically, he hits the ball plenty hard. He just needs to adjust the launch angle a little bit. And the Dodgers are among the best organizations, maybe the best organization in baseball, at helping guys optimize that launch angle, which, to clarify, doesn't mean make everybody hit the ball higher. It means optimize and make them hit at the optimal launch angle. And Yordan Alvarez, if you look at his minor league numbers, kind of similar. Didn't hit a lot of home runs early on, hit the ball hard, and then grew into that swing. And eventually, so Josue De Paula is 19 years old and is reminding people of Yordan Alvarez, which, as a fan of a team that has a DH under contract for the next 9 years, that's a little bit interesting. We'll have to see if De Paula can stick in the outfield, whereas Yordan Alvarez does play some outfield, but it's not a good situation when he does. Hopefully De Paula can play a corner outfield spot, because if so, that could be a huge boost for the Dodgers in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he doesn't need to play corner outfield for a couple of years before first base opens up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's enough for prospect talk for today. Let's talk about the bullpen some more. We're going to come back and talk about another name that the Dodgers have apparently been linked to. So thanks for making us your first listen, and please keep it locked on Dodgers. Hey, we are back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being here live with us. If you are, good group here live, good group in the chat. Appreciate all of you. Richie Flores offered me to let me podcast from his man cave on Friday. I'll be at my parents' house, but I appreciate the offer, Richie. I'd have to find out where Devore is. I know I've seen it on freeway signs. I assume I've been close to Devore, but appreciate the offer. Thank you all for being here with us. Always fun talking Dodgers with you. Be sure to become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers, et cetera, et cetera. The Dodgers obviously are adding Kirby Yates as soon as they open up a roster spot for him. And as we talked about during the Vesia segment, the Dodgers bullpen is jam-packed with good relievers. And yet, Vince, some people are saying that he is being linked to Tim Hill, former Padre lefty Tim Hill, most recently seen not coming in to face Ohtani in Game 1 of the World Series, which ultimately ended with Nestor Cortez walking sadly off the mound after Freddie Freeman's grand slam. You know what? Who knows if Tim Hill would have done any better? But, Dodgers just finished beating Tim Hill in the World Series, and now at least one person is saying that that Tim Hill is on the Dodgers' radar. Do you buy that? Do you like that? What do you think of that, Vince?
Yeah, it's, with all these rumors, you never know exactly what. The wording was drawing interest from Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, D-backs, Rockies, and Angels. Also mentioned Yankees and Mets. And Tim Hill, to me, would have made sense earlier in the offseason when we didn't know that Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates were going to be on the Dodgers. Right now, maybe not as much sense. But just like we talked about with the Dodgers sending someone to be at Max Scherzer's, throwing session the other day, and we've seen them. They were at someone else's throwing session, I believe, not that long ago. You just have your due diligence, and a guy like Tim Hill, it would have been cheap. If maybe it was a contingency plan if they didn't get Tanner Scott or if they didn't get Kirby Yates, and hey, here's a guy that's cheap who doesn't necessarily throw that hard or anything like that, but has some things that could work out, especially, in the Dodgers bullpen, because he's obviously not the velocity. He doesn't throw hard at all, but what he does, the eliteness, his elite status is at not allowing hard contact, and getting the ball hit on the ground. And he's in the 100th percentile in both of those, which means, no one above him. And for, a Dodgers bullpen that should have a solid defense behind him, that works out for a Dodgers team that, could always use somebody that, the Dodgers bullpen hasn't necessarily been predicated on strikeout stuff the last few years. They've had guys that do strikeouts, but it has been on, limiting hard contact, which is Brusdar Graterol. Has lights out stuff, but not necessarily strikeout stuff, but he limits hard contact very well. So do a lot of these other guys. I mean, even Blake Treinen, who's been a strikeout guy before, but wasn't necessarily a strikeout guy too much last year, but he limits hard contact. I mean, Evan Phillips limits hard contact. So based on what he does best, it makes sense for the Dodgers to be interested in him. Based on what the Dodgers have currently in the bullpen, probably not as much.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing this one. Like, it's one thing to not build your bullpen on strikeouts. Tim Hill, the last 3 years, his strikeout rate is roughly half the league average. Like, the dude just doesn't strike anybody out. And at some point, you gotta. Honestly, I think that's why Nestor Cortez got brought in Game 1 of the World Series, because Tim Hill doesn't get strikeouts. And what the Yankees kind of needed was, they ended up getting a pop-up from Shohei Ohtani, which is basically the same as a strikeout, but weak contact can come back to bite you. And we've seen it. We saw it with Kenley Jansen in his declining years with the Dodgers, when he didn't have quite the same strikeout stuff anymore. And, I always think back to Game 4 of the 2020 World Series, where if Kenley had just struck that dude out, the Dodgers win that game. But he didn't have the strikeout stuff, and whatever that dude's name is, what was that dude's name?
Marwin.
What's that?
Marwin.
No, on the 2020 World Series.
Oh, 2020.
Game 4.
Brett Phillips.
Brett Phillips, terrible hitter, but he blooped one in because Kenley couldn't strike him out, and that's like, I don't need everybody to be a strikeout fiend, but Tim Hill, is pushing it way too far for me towards the sides of strikeouts don't matter at all. And I'm not there yet. And so I would guess the Dodgers never had any serious interest in Tim Hill. And if they did, I'm sure it was before Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates signed. I think Tyler Matzik is the other one you were probably thinking of, that the Dodgers were at his throwing session. And yeah, I haven't thought about Tyler Matzik since 2020 either. Has he pitched?
2021, he dominated the Dodgers in that one inning.
Yeah, I guess, they did play the Braves 2 years in a row. So I guess 2021 is the last time I thought about him. Didn't play in 2023, and last year only threw 10 innings and wasn't good. But yeah, he's another guy. Yeah, so his strikeout rate in 2020 and 2021 was elite, and then it was below average the last couple of years. And Tyler Matzik, I think we can all agree he can go jump off a bridge, because he's one of those guys like Alex Verdugo who tried to say that the 2020 World Series didn't count. And I think that people who are on the team that blew a 3-1 lead in the NLCS in 2020 probably ought to just keep their mouths shut about 2020,
Yeah, I agree on that. Yeah, like I said, I don't think Tim Hill was a realistic option. I think it was maybe a backup of a backup option. I'm sure they reached out and said, hey, Tim Hill, if you want to come play for, the league minimum, if we don't get, 3 more guys ahead of you, then, sure, come on down. But like I said, I do think that the Dodgers could see, I guess it may be a different type of arm too. I mean, there's always different ways to go about it, but maybe not so much these days as it was in the past. Like, oh, you want a guy who, throws 100, and then you bring in a reliever that, throws mid 90s or low 90s with a lot of movement, that type of deal. But yeah, he serves a purpose for certain teams. I don't think he would necessarily serve that purpose as well on a team like the Dodgers.
Yeah, he'll get a job. It won't be with the Dodgers. So, last little thing, just we haven't touched on it, don't have a lot to say about it, but the Dodgers and Dodgers owner Mark Walter have committed $100 million to a new group, what was called LA Rises, I think, to help rebuild after the fires. And so just wanted to shout that out. As we said, at the time, that once the needs were a little bit more clear, it was obvious the Dodgers were going to do something big. And but as a Dodger fan, I was happy to see that happen. And obviously, as somebody with a soft spot for the city of LA, happy to see that, and happy to see the Dodgers stepping up in a big way, and hopefully other teams will too, and individuals and everything, and everybody come together. So that's a good thing. You got anything else for today, Vince?
I got nothing else.
All right. Yeah, one last thing too. Cole just mentioned the Rogers brothers broken up in San Francisco. The Giants traded Taylor Rogers. Now they're down to one Taylor Rogers, who looks like that. They just have the slow, soft tossing righty instead of the hard air throwing lefty. So, probably means the Giants will finish in 4th place instead of 4th place. So good for them. That'll do it for us for today. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen or your last listen. Thanks for being here live with us. We appreciate that. Please be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. Put comments in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube. The chat is fun, but comments are forever. So check that out. What else? You can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Text direct with us. Get our thoughts before the podcast, join our Discord server, all that fun stuff. Just a few bucks a month with a free 14-day trial. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and both of our DMs are open over there. You can also email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.